So I've been having this question in my mind for a little while now. Is Wonder Woman 1984 kind of like this generation's Batman Begins? And there's a lot to think about that actually. I've heard the comparisons a lot of times before. I actually saw Wonder Woman 1984 for the first time a couple of months ago. Usually I'm very hype about Wonder Woman. Like the first movie I watched it in the theaters when it came out. I wanted to watch this one in the theaters as well, but for obvious reasons, I really couldn't. And kind of just hearing all of my friends and colleagues kind of have such divisive thoughts about the movie, it kind of held me back from watching it for a little while. It's not something as simple as just like some people saying that the movie sucked or it wasn't good or it wasn't as good as the first one. It's friends and colleagues whose opinion I really trust because they are like huge fans of the Wonder Woman franchise itself as well. So it kind of took me a while to finally see it. And I watched it finally a couple of months ago. It was all right in my opinion. Like, I can see why people hated it, but at the same time, there's an appreciation, at least from my part, from it. It definitely did remind me of Batman Returns in some elements, not so much in the movie itself, but yes, how tonally different it was from the first movie and also people's reaction. Like, right now, it isn't as palpable because so many years has passed and the movie has grown like on people since it came out, but Batman Returns was really hated when it first came out. I mean, I actually saw Batman Returns in the theaters when I was a little kid. I must have been like 12 years old or something when Batman Returns came out in the theater. And I remember like the huge difference of the people. The first Batman movie, of course, I saw when I was a little kid in the theaters as well. Obviously, became always been a huge Batman fan. I was really obsessed with Batman when I was a little kid, especially after the first Tim Burton movie. And I remember how people were like excited at the movie and really happy with it. And then the contrast when Batman Returns came out and my mom took me to the theater, um, people booed at the end. I don't know if that happened in any other theaters, but at least in the theater that I was in, people actually booed and started throwing trash at the screen at the end. It's the only time I've ever actually seen that, to be honest. And I liked the movie well enough. I actually loved it, not as much as the first one, but again, like I've always had like more affinity for dark movies anyway, so I actually really loved Batman Returns when I was a little kid even. I would never say I like it better than the first Batman or that is my favorite Batman movie of all the franchises. But it was good. It was entertaining. There was a lot of value to that movie. And of course, it was different from the first one. But back then, that was when you don't expect sequels. Like back then, like in the 80s and even in the 90s, still, nobody really studios really didn't make movies with franchises in mind like nowadays where actors sign multi-picture, multi-sequel and multi-appearance deals when it comes to superhero movies, and a lot of that also stems from like the MCU and then kind of like um Batman Begins, where they already kind of had that in mind of doing franchises and installments rather than just to do one movie, see how it does, and if it does well, then let's go ahead and make a sequel. And a lot of times that's why sequels kind of faltered back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s, even to an extent in the early 2000s. The sequels were never really good, and definitely not as good as the original movie. Like it was kind of like the exception and not the rule that a sequel was going to be as good, at least as the original. Like The only ones that I can think of in that time was Aliens and Terminator 2. And that had like the James Cameron effect, I guess. So, yeah, like there was like maybe some of the Rocky movies, but it was really the exception and not the norm. So, just kind of looking at how people are reacting to Wonder Woman 1984 or Wonder Woman 84, if you prefer to call it that. It does remind me a lot of the blowback that Batman Returns had back then when it first came out as well, and for very different reasons. And I do excuse me, I do understand the hate that both movies got in the beginning, especially with Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman, like the first movie was one of the all-time best superhero origin movies done, if not the best. Right up there with, I guess Deadpool also can have an argument on being one of the best superhero origin movies ever as well. And yeah, I am being serious. Like Deadpool, the first one was an amazing movie and also was groundbreaking in many ways. And Wonder Woman, the original movie was amazing, and I think a lot of it had to do of having that combination of Patty Jenkins directing sensibilities, kind of mixed with Zack Snyder's producing sensibilities. It kind of balanced each other out pretty well, actually, and complemented each other to an extent where it was a very well balanced, great movie as opposed to Wonder Woman 84. I guess it's the same problem that Batman Returns had. The studio essentially said, make a Tim Burton movie for the sequel, and the studio pretty much said, make a Patty Jenkins movie for the sequel. I'm really conflicted with this one because if you don't compare it to the first movie too much, it's not that bad of a movie. And yeah, I agree that especially with the opening, it felt a lot like one of the old Christopher Reeve Superman movies from the 70s, which is not bad in itself. It's just that the tone is so different compared to the first movie. The tonal shift is probably what's the most jarring from the first movie to Wonder Woman 84. I guess if the first movie was a bit more campier, then yeah, you can like say, well, that's kind of what they were building to, but the second movie was just so campy, and I love campy, don't get me wrong, but again, like if it's going to be such a tonal shift from the first movie, um kind of try to do it, ease it in a little bit more, I guess. It'll be interesting to see what Wonder Woman 3 is going to be like, especially since I heard that Patty Jenkins was no longer working on the Star Wars projects that she was going to do due to some creative differences and whatnot. That was what was going to hold back Wonder Woman 3 quite a bit, but apparently now they're going to go through with Wonder Woman 3 a little more sooner than expected because of that. That's not to say that Wonder Woman 84 didn't have its problems, because it did. It could have used a little more Wonder Woman in the movie. It could have used at least one more action scene, and yeah, like I hate to use this word, but there were some problematic elements with Captain Trevor being back in the movie the way that he came back, and that whole relationship that formed throughout the movie. I don't want to like spoil it too much if by any chance you haven't seen the movie yet. But yeah, there is an argument to be made there. And again, it kind of comparing it to Batman Returns. I remember a lot of the hate that the movie got was from the Penguin, actually, because he was making all these sexual innuendos and being super dark. And when he died, it was like one of the most bizarre, most dark deaths in a superhero movie, which was kind of like, yeah, you're not gonna get McDonald's Happy Meals out of this character. So yeah, there's quite a few similarities between Batman Returns and Wonder Woman 84 in that sense. Anyway, what do you guys think? Wonder Woman 84, thumbs up, thumbs down, midway. To me, honestly, it's kind of like a midway. It wasn't as, in my opinion, it wasn't as bad as some people made it out to be, but it wasn't as great as the other half of the people made it out to be anyway. It's kind of like a middle ground. If you compare it too much to the first movie, you will be disappointed. If you see it as its own standalone movie, then it's decent enough to be entertained for a while. At least that's what I think anyway. I could be totally wrong, and you can totally tell me in the comments or whatever below. Anyway, this has been another episode of The Danger Zone, the first one of 2022. Thank you for watching, and I hope you guys have a great new year.